Hello everyone and welcome to this panel discussion at a Crossroads dependent DEI in life sciences and healthcare as part of the Safer to Be Summit. I am Bex Maxwell Warrior. I use they, she pronouns. I'm a white person with orange and black hair and blue glasses, and I'm wearing a black and white jumper today. And as a proud Science Alliance steering team member and a member of LabCorp, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this proud Science Alliance event today. Before our brilliant panel introduce themselves, just a couple of pieces of housekeeping. If you require use of closed captions, you can turn them on by visiting More Actions in Teams. This may appear as 3 dots. You navigate to Language and Speech menu and turn on live captions. You may also be prompted to select a language too. This is a completely safe space where you can ask what you need to understand the content. You can use the chat feature, or we hope to have some time for questions at the end where you'll be able to come off mute. Until then, we ask that viewers remain muted to ensure the viewing experience of all people. The discussion today centres around diversity and inclusion, so if at any point the topic of conversation hits a little bit too close to home, please feel free to step away, no questions asked. Your well-being is important. And with that, it's time to have introductions from our panel, starting with Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm Melissa Leslie. I use the she, hers pronouns. I am a white woman with dark brown hair, and I have a floral dress on today. I'm the Senior Vice President of Total Rewards and Chief Inclusion, Diversity, and Belonging Officer at LabCorp. Pleasure to be here with you all today. Imran, I think I'm handing over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's Imran Ali. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a brown-skinned individual wearing a black and white jumper. I work for TRIA as a global payment manager. I'm also the Global Pride ERG leader for TRIA. I'll hand it over to Adrian.
Thank you, Imran. So hi, everyone. My name is Adrian Menaspa. I use he, him pronouns. I am a senior design engineer at Pfizer in the UK. One of my other jobs is also a project lead for our D&I steering team in the UK. I am a white man. I've got medium longish hair, brownish hair, and I am wearing a white jumper today. And I will be passing over to Annie.
Hi, everyone, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. I'm Annie. I use the pronoun she, her. I have mousy blonde short hair, big brown rim glasses, and I have a lovely blue jumper on today with the words Island written on it because I'm a fan. Who am I? So I am the Proud Science Alliance comms lead and one of the company directors.
Thank you all and welcome. We do appreciate you taking the time to discuss this important topic with us today. So how it's going to work today, folks, is I'm going to ask a number of questions to our panel. And at the end, as I said, I'm hoping that we'll have some time for audience questions too. So to my first question, to gain an understanding of the current DEI landscape in science and healthcare, it's important to hear from our PSA member networks about their experience of diversity, equity, inclusion in the last 12 months. Imran, could you share how DEI has been impacted in your organisation? And Annie, what impacts have we witnessed through the PSA?
Sure. I think I've been one of the lucky few to be working in a company that's not openly rolled back the DEI department. However, I have felt that the shift is that there is a heavy reliance on the ERG leaders and members in that if you want something like an event, policy change, or whatever it is, you and only you will be working to push it out. I sense that there's a morale shift that's happened and overall people are less engaged due to the various variables that impact their day-to-day. And additionally, because of not being in a sort of time allocated space, I think there's an additional backing of personal time asked from colleagues who may already be swamped. So it's not really on their priority. So they kind of just fall back to the back burners. I'll also say that one of the things is the onus really feels on all of us to make these safe spaces and to have DEI that not only assembles as part of a wider ESG structure, but take charge in those initiatives for LGBTQI plus groups and individuals. If done correctly, this can provide increased innovation and creativity, productivity by way of improving morale and enhanced financial performance that we can see throughout. And I'll hand it over to Annie.
Thanks, Imran. So at the PSA, we run quite regular community groups where we listen to members of the different ERGs. And this is what we've been hearing from a lot of you. And I think the key thing is there's a lot of concern, a lot of worry. Basically, from around February 2025 is when we started to hear rumblings of changes. And dependent on the company, some of those changes have been small. Some have been very large, but I think everyone has seen some sort of change. Obviously, many were trying to comply with the law and meet the legal requirements laid out by the government in the US, because a lot of our sector have a footprint in the US and didn't want to lose business. So they felt it was key to make a move to show that. We're hearing that lots of companies have done a big review, audit, and adaptation of some of their global programs, policies, and practices. So that could be something like some of the policies that were to do with maternity leave. Instead of basically before it might have said he, they, she, now it's just gone back to she. I know a lot of transgender policies have changed. So people are kind of feeling like they're kind of less visible in those policies. They made a big shift and now they're taking it back again, which isn't, of course, good. We're hearing that, on the whole, companies are remaining committed to employee resource groups and employee networks. However, the employee networks themselves are still waiting to really feel what the impact is on them. But many have let us know that they are seeing less external recognition around kind of DEI awareness days, culture events, celebrating, the diversity of their workforce. It's been kind of much more generic. I mean, just one example, Pride. Some companies took kind of LGBT away from Pride, and it was just saying, pride in our employees. And that's great, but it did kind of impact LGBT of saying, well, aren't we visible anymore? This was our day. But we can see where that's coming from. There has been a change in the language. So I know diversity is now difference, and that's changed in quite a lot of companies, that sort of language. And we're seeing that across some websites which are taking off and updating their language. And that can make employees just feel a bit uneasy about what is the next change. But I think the key thing is we think we're still at the start. People seem to have gone in hard or gone in lightly, but we know this is just the start, and we're waiting to see more of the ripples. But that's definitely what we're kind of seeing. Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think you touched on an important point there too, in that a lot of the businesses that we work with are not just in one location. They serve a global audience, and therefore the response to global need can sometimes shift. But we do tend to feel it based heavily on the biggest markets. And I think that's where a lot of the shift towards what is happening in the US has been helping or contributing, should I say, rather than helping to some of the changes that we're witnessing. And I think it's clear that the response to the loud backlash and sort of some of the negative rhetoric around DEI is very much business dependent from what you've both shared. And while some will see the decision to roll back or keep DEI practices as black and white, there are other factors which could impact business decision making. Melissa, as the ID&B lead at LabCorp, what hidden challenges are businesses facing when making decisions about DEI and whether or not to roll back or double down?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I assumed the role of Chief ID&B Officer in March of 2025. So that was certainly interesting timing. And I very quickly learned that there are no decisions or actions to be taken that are black and white. It is very much a gray space at this point. But for me, I think for any business, any decisions we're making regarding inclusion and diversity are very personal, and it's never going to be a one size fits all answer. So I think it's genuinely about every organization taking a look and finding a balance and trying trying to figure out the best way to embed diversity in your ecosystem as opposed to it just being a standalone program. I think that tends to get fatigued and often neglected. And I think having that embeddedness is just really, really important to any company's strategy. I think it's also important and helpful to keep in mind that diversity is a spectrum. So we think about race, gender, equality. It's also about talent, skills, capabilities. And, I think businesses really, when they're making decisions about DEI and I need to think about how that full range of diversity is contributing to fueling the mission. It's really important to be able to look back to your company's North Star at the end of the day to guide your decisions. I always ask myself, what am I trying to accomplish at the end of the day with our inclusion and diversity programs? And how is that going to help enable LabCorp's success? And I think if you can keep that high level mission in mind, then you're always going to make the right choices.
Yeah, I think you touched on there as well, just sort of the intersectional nature of identities. It can't be a one size fits all thing because no person is any one thing. We all have intersections of our identity, which may mean that our needs shift and are greater than those around us or are less than those around us. But I think the one thing that anybody can agree on is that safety is the bare minimum of what needs to be achieved, and to have a workforce that is engaged, to have a workforce that is moving forward to reach our goals, we need to ensure that safety and well-being is a part of that. So thank you, Melissa. I think that does sort of open the rhetoric a little bit and understanding of why it's important and the conversations that are being had. I think most of the people on this call today will agree that DEI is pertinent for a business. We're all people, especially those of us on the panel, are all people who are deeply involved with trying to drive diversity and inclusion initiatives. And while it is pertinent for any business, why is DEI particularly important in science and healthcare? This is open to any of the panel.
I can have a go with that one. So
Sure.
yeah, you're right. It's important across all sectors, but I think within science and healthcare, it's really, really significant. Number of reasons for that is I think it's essential for scientific discovery and innovation. It's all about bringing diverse groups together with a wide range of backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, and really all coming together to kind of make breakthroughs. And I think unless you have that diverse perspective, you're not going to be as good as that and as innovative. I think it's about challenging biases as well. There's a lot of unconscious bias out there. And obviously, as it's unconscious, people don't realize that they have it, but they have it. I think we all probably have it in some way or other. And unless you have a diverse team, you're not going to identify and challenge those biases. So I think that's really key as well. Thinking about understanding the patients. We have a lot of healthcare disparities, and unless you have people that understand patient needs, and that's not just to do with LGBT, it can be cultural differences, social economic factors, and how that influences health outcomes. Again, that is going to not have the right outcome for communities across the area in which your organisation is looking after. I know another big thing for science is around clinical trials and having representation in research. As we all know, if you're from that background, drugs work differently on different people. Skincare products work different on different people. And unless you have a diverse group of people to try to test those products on, you're not going to know how effective they are and what interventions might be needed for specific populations. And finally, I guess it's all about attracting and retaining talent. If you want to get the best people, you have to be seen as inclusive. You have to be seen as diverse. You have to bring people together from different backgrounds. Otherwise, unless you're seen as that outwardly, people are not going to want to join your company. And also, unless you are seen to support that internally, people are not going to want to stay. So I think those are some kind of key aspects there.
I think I would add, Annie, too, I agree with everything that you said. One of the things that we like to think about at LabCorp, and it's a critical pillar of our ID&B strategy, is also the connection back to the customer. So we want to make sure that our workforce, our practices, our policies are reflective of the diverse nature of the customers that we serve. And in order, again, to be successful as a business, we really have to be mindful and cognizant about we do serve a very diverse set of customers across the US and across the globe. And if we're not thinking about that internally as a part of our strategy, we're just not going to be as effective.
I think you both touched on that beautifully. And I think something that stands out for me is diversity isn't just people and the diverse aspects that they bring. It's diversity of thought, it's diversity of background, it's diversity of experiences that can help shape the science that we do and that can help us therefore have better outcomes when it comes to serving our patients, when it comes to serving our clients, when it comes to basically providing better health outcomes for people. And, you know, Annie, you touched on healthcare disparities. It'd be remiss for me to mention that we actually have a talk tomorrow on about healthcare disparities, which you would all be welcome to join at 2 p.m. tomorrow, again, as part of the Safer to Me Summit. It's a hugely important topic, and especially understanding the impacts within the LGBTQ plus community in the greater context of healthcare is really important. So I appreciate your thoughts there. And touching on the Safer to Me Summit, we are obviously meeting today as part of that summit, which speaks directly to the experiences of LGBTQIA plus people. Why is rollback on DEI particularly impactful to the LGBTQIA community? I'm going to push this one to Adrienne.
Thank you. I think there is a few things to consider. So we've seen, you know, all those DEI program being rolled back in many organizations. And I think we should also take a step back and see that those initiatives have also been rolled back, not only in terms of organizational rights, but also rights in general. An example that really struck me is, you know, in 2023, we've started to see in Italy some same-sex families being deregistered or attempted to be deregistered by the government. And I think that's you know, in terms of equality of rights, that was fairly striking to me to see that this was the new normal as well. But it's not a recent problem. You know, we've started to see that for a couple of years now. I think why LGBTQIA plus people are more severely impacted. I think we see all those programs being defunded, while we also have, as a community, we also know that we have a higher chance of mental health challenges, for instance. We are more severely impacted by those. Discrimination in care, poorer health outcomes. You know, it's some of the challenges that were here already. So the removal of those programs are really extremely negatively impacting this more already fragile community. And I think there's also a risk of extreme marginalization or more even erasure in some sense, which is more of like a societal problem. So it's not just, you know, DEI frameworks in the companies that are impacted. It's really, I think it's a wider trend, and that's why it's a higher impact for this community.
Thank you, Adrienne. I think you spoke beautifully there, and something again that resonated with me is that intersectionality piece. So anybody who is LGBTQ plus isn't only that. You know, we have race to consider, gender, class. You also have where we're based. The challenges that we face can often be impacted based on the laws that surround us, and they are being heavily impacted wherever you are in the world. I also feel like we're at this tipping point where for years we've actually seen positive progress in that we're seeing more countries who allow gay marriage, we're seeing more countries that allow same-sex parenting. We've seen these changes, but suddenly it feels like that is going backwards, and we have these conversations where these changes that we fought for, or that generations before us have fought so hard for, it feels like it's slowly slipping away and being taken away from us. And it adds a level of fear, it adds a level of uncertainty. And how can you show up as a fully present individual in the workplace if you have all of these challenges that you're facing outside of the workplace that you feel like you cannot discuss or cannot even talk about with the people that surround you because you feel like you're not included? So it's hugely important, I think, especially working for global businesses, to recognize that it's not just about being LGBTQ plus, it's about the other intersections of our identity, which may also already be marginalized. And therefore it just feels very heavy. It feels like a very heavy thing and heavy load to bear. So it's how we can make sure that these individuals feel supportive and they have things in place and that it's not always falling down to them. I think something that a few of you have brought up today is that a lot of businesses where they may have been rolling back to other initiatives are relying heavily on the ERGs. And while they are ERGs, they are employee-led, they are employee resource groups. These individuals, while dedicating their time, are also individuals who may be impacted by the changes that they're seeing, and that is a heavy load to bear too. So it's about making sure that these individuals are supported as well. We've talked a lot about the impacts that these changes are having, but I want to talk a little bit now about maybe benefits of inclusion. So what are some of the measurable benefits of maintaining strong DEI frameworks, especially for the LGBTQI plus community and for LGBTQI plus inclusion? Melissa, I'm going to hand that to you.
Yeah, no, I think there are several, and we've touched upon a couple of them, right? But I think, first and foremost, for me, it's about creating that environment of psychological safety, because we know that that absolutely has the ability to drive employee engagement. We see it in our engagement survey numbers. Employees that participate in employee resource groups are actively more engaged at work. So it really does drive productivity. It drives attraction. It drives retention. I think, Annie, you touched upon this, right? In order to be able to market yourself as an organization, you have to be able to share that you have an inclusive and diverse culture. So I also think that diversity really drives innovation and thought leadership. So back to some of the points that we were raising earlier, for companies to really be productive and to get to the best outcomes, we really have to have that DE&I framework and lens on everything that we do. It's just so critical.
Yeah, I think that's hugely important, and thank you for sharing that. I think something that you mentioned there was like psychological safety. And I think that's hugely important no matter what identity you are. Something that I like to say is that safety is the bare minimum that needs to be achieved for all people. And how can we ensure that? And part of ensuring that is making sure that diverse individuals feel like they can bring their whole selves to work without fear of what the person next to them is going to say, and without fear of being able to come out. Something that I like to share is that LabCorp is one of the first places that I came out as gender diverse, because I recognised individuals that I could speak to about it and speak to about it openly and honestly. And that makes me incredibly proud, that is somewhere I could do that at work. But I also recognise that that's not the same journey that everybody is on. Not every individual shows up to their workplace and knows that they can bring their whole true selves. And that's why conversations of this nature are important, but it's why DE&I is important as a whole. So I have a question that is open to any of our panelists now. How can leadership in healthcare and science create a genuine culture of belonging where all individuals feel valued, respected and supported?
I can give that one a go as well. So I think first of all, it's around creating a genuine sense of belonging through the leaders showing commitment and accountability, and they can do that in a number of ways. I think they can show it by championing D&I, championing the employee resource groups, championing things like awareness days, just showing up, being visible. And those leaders, of course, don't have to be LGBT. They could be from any kind of group, because allies are as important as people within the community. So I think that's really key. I think they're also great at kind of championing training, D&I training. And I think if leaders can ensure that other leaders are trained in D&I and really understand about things like unconscious bias, inclusive communication, cultural competence and allyship, I think that is a massive step forward. Many leaders will talk about being D&I trained, but it's bigger that it's bigger than just feeling comfortable with pronouns. I think is the key thing. And I think it's just, as you talked about, the kind of being a safe space. It's for leaders to make employees aware and to feel comfortable in there being a safe space, to know that they can have this open dialogue and open communication without being judged. I think that's the key thing, and they need to really show that and facilitate that, because I think unless they go straight ahead and facilitate it, employees won't come to them. They need to really show that they want to hear and want to listen. And then I think it's just they need to be the ones to kind of look at policies and practices and make sure they're equitable, and kind of really push for regular reviews, push for revisions in HR policy to make sure that everyone is included.
Thank you, Annie. Does anybody else from the board from the panel want to discuss that question?
You took my words. I was going to mention, one of the things that I'm most proud about at LabCorp is our board of directors is incredibly engaged in all of our ID&B conversations. We do an annual update to them, talking about things that are going on, events, what are the ERGs up to. I think that lead by example really does have to start at the top. So having that conversation in the boardroom, I think is incredibly important. I would also add that all of our ERGs have executive committee sponsors at LabCorp, which I think is, just a great thing. I'm really proud of. They're all very engaged in making sure that they are a part of our diverse community. So it really does start at the top.
I would echo those sentiments as well, like having a fully thought out strategy in terms of DEI coming from the top down would probably be the best step for creating a genuine culture, because everyone will look to their leaders to seeing how they are acting at these particular times. And if the leaders are shying away from difficult conversations, or they've not got a fully thought out plan of action to overcome or to change policies and essentially remove the rigmarole and red tape for the ERG members and leaders, then it's kind of not, this kind of could produce the opposite effect if it's not there. So definitely having something that's fully thought out, a strategy in mind that people can follow and is easy to follow. Yeah.
Thank you, Imran. Adrian, any thoughts on that question?
I think my panelist colleagues have said pretty much everything. I think it's important for leaders to be authentic about D&I and how they feel about it. I think Andy's been very right in pointing out the roles of the ERGs and those safe spaces. But those safe spaces can really only be effective if they are supported from the top, and I think that's the most important thing they can do.
Thank you. Yeah, I think something that I've spoken to various ERG leaders about over the years is sometimes that we feel this level of support from maybe an executive leadership level, and we feel the layer of support of the people on the ground doing the work, but sometimes those middle managers can have varying degrees of support for the ERGs, and it can be because it isn't hitting the bottom line, and it isn't, how does this impact my everyday? So something I like to say is that we need to make the ERGs and diversity and inclusion about the business. Touch on Melissa's point earlier, if we don't have diverse and inclusive workforce, how can we serve our diverse patient populations, our diverse clients? Trying to get leadership to understand that diversity is an important part of the mission, and moving forward is really important in getting the support for people to be able to be engaged in ERGs and things like that. But that can be difficult, especially for middle managers who maybe are feeling it from the top and are also feeling it from the bottom. I often say that they sometimes have the hardest roles in leadership because they do feel it from both sides. But it's getting people to understand the value of these spaces. Something that as well always strikes me is that if we want to hire the best people, we need to be able to answer their questions, and we need to be able to answer, what are we doing to achieve to ensure that we have diverse workforces. And it goes beyond that, what are we doing to achieve carbon net zero? All of these things, they all add together to make sure that we get the strongest candidates possible. And we can't hire those people if they see that we're not including them and they don't feel like they belong and they're included. So there's work to be done, and it's not just from the top or from the bottom, it's that middle area of understanding how can this benefit me and my teams. And there are other benefits as well. If you have individuals who are actively involved in the ERGs, they're growing skill sets that they may not grow in their everyday role. Leadership, leading projects, delivering training. There are all of these things that they may not get to do in their everyday. So there's importance there too of not just it being a diverse and safe space, but it actually being a way to increase the skill set of our workforce too. Thank you all for touching on that. Something that we've talked about a little bit is the impact of changes in D&I within organisations on healthcare as a setting and on patient population. So my next question touches a little bit on that. Can healthcare providers and scientific institutions effectively address systemic biases that lead to disparate health outcomes for marginalised patient communities without a strong DE&I approach? I'm going to hand this to Adrian in the first instance.
Thank you. I've got the short answer and then the longer one. So the short answer is no. I just want to illustrate really something. So as a pharmaceutical company and life sciences company, that's going to hopefully resonate. One of the key challenges we face today as an industry is non-adherence. So essentially, 50% of patients with non-communicable disease will not follow their course of treatment until completion. That translates into 200,000 deaths per year just in the EU. And that's obviously even more critical in underserved communities. One of the key factors for that is, and I think Annie touched on that earlier, is the sort of heterogeneity of the patient population. I'm a design engineer and I design medical devices. One of my biases is that I will design for what I know, and therefore will make devices. My biases will make me create devices for people like me, whether I want it or not. That's going to be my unconscious bias. And if we want to reach out and remove those health inequities, we have to start as designers, as engineers, as scientists. We need to start creating medications, treatments, devices for a wide range of population. It's not something that can easily be done if all your engineers, scientists are from the same community. And we also have to consider that what maybe the majority where your R&D labs are based is not necessarily the global majority as well. So you have to be mindful of this heterogeneity of your population. And I think Annie again pointed that out brilliantly earlier. As scientists, science thrives on diversity of point of views. You can't have solid science if you're not challenging assumption, creating those sort of redundancies into your viewpoints and science. So we really need to, and I think the key word is here is actively foster that diversity if we want to tackle those health inequities. So yeah, I think we need those D&I approach if we want to have a robust science and effectively address the systemic biases.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you for sharing, your awareness of your own unconscious bias. I think that's hugely important and something that not a lot of us do daily. We don't practice this idea of actually what is an unconscious bias and how is it impacting the work that I do. But it is important. And, you can have a room full of people who like you say, don't have diversity of thought. And even if you've got the strongest ally in the room, it's difficult for them sometimes to advocate for those other communities. And while allyship is hugely important and incredibly valued and desperately needed, especially not just outside of our communities, but within it, we need LGBT people to be supporting trans people. We need that allyship within our communities as well. The loudest voices are often the ones that are most heard. So without having those diverse people within our businesses advocating for these different communities, it is hard for us to create outcomes that are going to positively benefit more than just one type of person. And as we've touched on a lot today, no person is any one thing. We have intersectionality. We are all very different, and our experiences are often what shape us and shape our thoughts and ideas. So it's important to have them included. Thank you for sharing that. I have one last schedule question, and then I'm going to hand over to some audience questions. What advice do you have for ERG leaders or HR professionals who are currently advocating for the need of DEI practices in their organisations? I have this listed as Melissa and Annie, but Adrian and Imran, you're welcome to answer too.
Yeah, well, happy to start, but I'm sure everybody has thoughts. I think for me, the advice I would give is never lose sight of your purpose. Your organization has a mission, and in any way, shape, or form, inclusion, diversity, and belonging practices are going to be a part of that. I think storytelling is an incredibly powerful way to advocate, and we do some great storytelling at LabTour. I'm sure all of your organizations do as well. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to just building an organization where all of your employees feel valued, feel respected, feel heard. You're going to get the best and brightest engagement if you can foster that type of culture. I think it's also really important to find the voices in your organization of the people who are willing to talk about DE&I, why it's important, why it can help a company succeed. I think my fellow panelists have touched upon this, but sometimes it can feel like a big burden to be held. So really building that network of people that are out there willing to provide that voice and that advocacy is important. It takes a village, right? Don't go after it alone. Find your people, find the supporters, and get them out there.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, I think I've been an ERG global lead before, and I think one thing that ERGs can fall down is often they find it hard to go beyond the moral argument and really show the tangible benefits. So I think we've spoken a bit about how DE&I can kind of impact the bottom line, positive impacts on talent, on financial performance, all that kind of stuff. So that is key. We've talked about having leaders as champions and people within the organization, peers as champions. I think also, if it's a very large organization, sometimes you'll see that some departments are better at DE&I than others. I remember back in the day when I was an ERG lead, our manufacturing sites, it was very hard to kind of really push DE&I in those areas. And you really have to look collaborate across the whole of the organization. It also might be hard for Salesforce because you don't see those people very often. How do you drive that with them? And then I think it's really about kind of being patient, something I'm not very good at, but kind of recognize that DE&I work, that is a bit complex and can take some patience and persistence. And if you don't get where you want to straight away, keep trying, keep banging that same drum. Don't just give up.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful point there, Annie. I think something that resonates with me is that don't give up, but it's hard sometimes when the world feels heavy to keep going. It can be challenging to think, why am I doing this? But it goes back to the what is my why? What is my organizational why? But what is my why for doing the work that I'm doing? I think sometimes the choices of D&I departments and HR professionals can be seen as negative because people don't always see the bigger picture. But what I would encourage those individuals to do is have open dialogue. If a change is happening, communicate why, because it can feel really isolating for individuals if they don't know why. Why is this changing? Why is this impacting me? But there's no discussion onto why this is happening. When in reality, it could be as simple as there's been a law change and we have to follow the law, but this is what we're doing to try and combat it. Because there are sometimes things that are happening behind the scenes that not everybody knows about, and where we are advocating, but without that open dialogue, it's isolating. You are putting people in an isolated position, and it is going to put them in a position where they do think negatively. They do think, well, what is the point and why should I carry on? And I think as well, Annie, what really resonated with me was like the moral argument versus the tangible benefits. And I think, again, that goes down to make it about business. A lot of leaders are thinking with a business first mindset. And while a lot of people will argue that people first is important because the people are the ones on the ground doing the work, if we have to talk to individuals who have those business first mindsets, what can we take to them? What can we say to them to say, these are the benefits of having a diverse workforce? And it can be simple things such as if you have an ERG landing page and you've had more hits in a month than before, or if you've grown more members, you've grown the number of chapters that you have. being able to keep track of that data and those metrics and the positive benefits it's having on people can be the thing that helps win over somebody who may be questioning it. Because we have to remember too that D&I leads are often seeing it from both sides. They're having the communication from the staff on the ground and ERG leaders who want to see positive change and they want to see benefits, but they could also be talking to those leaders in the background who actually this isn't something that they deem worth caring about, or it's not something that is top of their agenda. So how can we help in those conversations? And that's by having a list of those tangible benefits and being able to see the positive changes that are being made by the work that we do. And it's not easy. It can be demoralizing. I think to the point of keep going is find the people in your organization, as Melissa said, who want to have those conversations, who want to help you. It can be very hard going at it alone and feeling like you're an individual, you're on your own. How can I move forward with this? It can feel really, really isolating. So find your tribe, find your people, whether that's joining an ERG or just finding those allies in your team who you can commiserate with after a tough day. But thank you both there for your thoughts. We have a good chunk of time now for any audience questions, so you can send them through the chat or you can come off mute. We'd love to hear from you if there's anything that you want to ask or anything you've heard today that's resonated with you that you want to touch upon too. Thank you, Rosie, for your question. So do the panel have examples of data that demonstrate tangible benefits of DEI, maybe from their companies or published data?
I'll chime in, Beck. I know this is a healthcare focused panel, but as you were talking, I was reflecting on an experience I had at a retail organization a couple of years ago. We were in a market that was very heavy in Latina and Hispanic population, and not a single member of our sales force spoke Spanish. Right. So it was kind of a huge lesson learned where we immediately, again, back to serving the communities, we added a couple of more diverse team members to our sales force, and sales went through the roof, triple digit improvement. So I think just kind of having that acknowledgement of, again, who are your communities, who are the customers that you're serving? Does your workforce reflect what you need to do to be successful is critically important. So the data is out there. I think I'm sure you all have experiences with that too, but it definitely makes a difference.
Bear with me one moment. Thank you, Melissa, for that. I think as well, to touch back to the question too, in terms of examples of data that just demonstrate tangible benefits. So something that we've been tracking over the past year is the amount of engagement that we've had. So I am a global co-lead for the Pride ERG at LabCorp, and we've been tracking certain data to show actually there are more people becoming engaged as time goes on. So something that we've seen is that at the end of 2023 we had 13 chapters. This year we have 24 chapters. So we've got 11 more chapters in a really a year and a half in that time frame. We've also increased our membership from 500 to 1,500. So we're seeing that more people are engaged and more people are involved, which is something that we could then take to leadership and say, this population of people is growing. In terms of other data, something that I always do is lean on charities. Charities like Stonewall, Just Like Us, there's Not a Phase. These organizations do different questionnaires, surveys throughout time, and they show the benefits of diverse workforces. I'd also lean on things like in the UK, we have the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development. They also have data about the importance of inclusion. So if you're struggling internally to find data that is going to support your case, I'd look external and look to what other businesses are doing, or look to what other organizations have been able to collect, so that then you can go back and say, it's not just us. This isn't just a conversation that we're bringing to the table. I hope that answered your question, Rosie. We also have a raised hand from Jake. Jake, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. This was a really good, engaging conversation. So I just wanted to say thank you first. But my question is, over the last couple years, the ERG that I'm specifically involved with, we've kind of gained some momentum and we've been getting some really good engagement, but mainly on site. And we've struggled more with remote colleagues. I wondered if you had any advice for how we could kind of focus our attention on remote colleagues.
So when I was an ERG lead at GSK, sorry, Adrian, we'd
Sure.
make sure that we had events that weren't just at head office, that we had what we would call site leads, who were part of the EIG, who would make sure that they were the point person on site to help with events, to help with questions, to be the eyes and ears, and also the person that they could speak to, which I think is key. The leadership team of the ERG would also go along to these events to kind of make themselves known. And I think that's the key. You have to go to where the people are, and then sometimes they'll then come to you or start to kind of join things. I think also I found that for a lot of the kind of remote employees were more nervous about coming forward, because if they were in kind of remote with less people that they knew were LGBT, there was kind of, do I kind of put my hand up here? So just to give them support and reassurance, it's just good to kind of like reach out to them and go and see them personally. Adrian, sorry.
Thank you, Annie. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's a challenge we are facing as well at Pfizer. We have different sites, and a lot of our colleagues are field-based, obviously. I think something that we found worked well was trying to engage with that middle management we discussed earlier, trying to find those culture champions where they are, try to engage with those managers who are perhaps more receptive to some of that information. It's also a challenge in terms of logistics, obviously, and what we found was that having events that are recorded, something that's available at point of use, like this event is recorded, obviously, and can be made available. What we found was podcasts as well. That's something that all the remote colleagues can engage with anonymously if they want to. It's just something to listen to, and it can be a sort of gateway to maybe more official events like this one. So that's something to find. But again, there's also trying to find a network to reach those colleagues. I think it's Annie pointed out, it can be very isolating sometimes if you're a remote colleague. So that's you have to find those routes to get to them.
I'm going to add to this one too with 2 points. I think one is, don't be afraid to ask what your membership wants. So if you have a lot of remote employees, maybe do a survey if you can to say, what events would you like to see? Very often there may be individuals who are happy to just be learning from the things that you share. But there may be people who have great ideas about how to create that engagement, especially if they're in remote positions. We're fortunate that we have a few different remote individuals on our board, and therefore we have, again, touching on what we discussed today, that diversity of thought of how we can include those individuals. But we've also been able to go out and say, well, what do you want to see from us? I think the other piece too is we've talked a lot about creating safe spaces, and what we do when we have events is create these safe spaces. So creating remote safe spaces is just as important as creating physical ones too. An event that my EG has collaborated in with another ERG, which our Women's Empowerment Network, is something called Espresso Yourself. They do it once a month, where it's a 1 hour coffee break, and they'll discuss certain topics depending on who they're collaborating with. So we did one earlier this year that was allyship, and what we did was we had a TED talk. It was a 5-minute TED talk that we watched at the top of the hour together, and then we had a whole hour discussion about that TED talk, what we thought about it, the impacts and things like that. So creating those safe spaces virtually as well as in physical locations is just as important, because that can make people feel more included as well. Are there any other questions? I have a couple of backups, if not. I'll ask one of my backups just while people have a think. So I'm going to go to you for this one, Annie. What is the PSA doing to support the ERGs of member organisations where DEI has been rolled back?
Hello, yes. So as I kind of mentioned first off, we're having these community group discussions kind of quite regularly to kind of hear what people are feeling, and as you said before, ask them what they need from us, which is always good as well. So what we are doing is we have different membership levels within the PSA, and some organisations have kind of full membership, which means they get kind of a lot of time with professionals. So what we're doing is giving advice. We put a lot of advice in our newsletter. We also run training like this. So if there isn't the possibility of having training at your company, we can run training for you. We have toolkits people can use. We also kind of get out in the community as well in life sciences, and kind of will go and run events at our organisation's sites. We have a list of speakers that can do that as well. So if you are kind of feeling alone, and maybe what is being done at your organisation is kind of tailed off, we're really happy to kind of sit down with you and see what you need and see how we can help you deliver it, and kind of really work through our network of speakers and consultants and people that really know their stuff in DEI, people like Rebecca there, who can come and kind of help you run that training. But always, we also have a mailbox, so if people do have questions or concerns, just get in contact with us and we will get into contact with you.
Thank you, Annie. Another topic that I wanted to touch on is trans inclusion. I think, there is a growing need for trans inclusive practices, especially in the wake of the recent Supreme Court ruling in the UK. What can businesses do to support their trans staff, or what can we as individuals do to support our trans teammates?
I'm gonna open the topic here. I think as business, as companies, your first port of call, I think, would be to have trans-inclusive policy, whether it's opening access to gender-affirming care, where that applies, or having a policy to accompany people going through gender transition. I think for me, that's sort of route one, and making sure that policy is widely known, available. That's the best possible advice I would give to any company that want to be trans inclusive.
Thank you.
I think as well, a lot of trans employees are very confused at the moment with with the great reports that have been coming out with, which gender toilet shall I use? What should I do here? What should I do there? And yes, it's, some companies did go out there a few years ago and create kind of gender neutral toilets. Some didn't. So I think it's just kind of reminding transgender employees that we're listening, we care, we are trying to do the best for you at this time. Let them know that they have rights, I think, as well, is key. There's, there is no law that says you cannot use a female toilet if you identify as female. There is no law. And I think if there are people that are finding it hard or getting pushback from other employees, I think it's all about just kind of raising awareness, having those open dialogue, supporting your transgender staff, making them kind of feel like they're, as I said, not alone, and being great allies, I think is key.
I think it comes back to the conversation that we were having around leadership, right? Employees around you are going to demonstrate the behaviors that they see from leaders. And I feel like as leaders, you have a responsibility to create that that open, that safe, that curious environment where people, do feel comfortable to raise their hand if they have an issue or if they need support. So making sure all leaders are equipped to be able to have those conversations, I just think is really critical.
Yeah, and I think something else that's critical at the moment is mental health. I mean, Adrian touched on it earlier. LGBTQ plus people experience higher rates of mental health and mental health challenges, and part of that at the moment is really being challenged. So, two things here. Is there an opportunity for somebody within your ERG to have mental health first aid training and maybe have more than one individual that is trained so that there's support for them? And something that I did earlier this year was we in all of the UK, we have a mental health first aid team. So I went to a team meeting and said, look, this is what's happened. This is the landscape for trans people at the moment. This may be something that comes to you. Somebody may come to you with these challenges. These are the resources that are available, and pointing out the resources externally, not just internally, but externally, that are support resources that are available, because we can only be effective mental health first aiders if we understand the people that we're trying to serve. And again, it goes down to something that we've touched on a lot today, is that diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And sometimes it just takes somebody to say, look, this is happening, and then it needs to be addressed. So I think that's important. And something else that we've talked about, I've talked about in the past week with going to the Out and Equal conference, is trans inclusive healthcare benefits something that your organisation can look into? Starting the conversation, pointing out that this would be something of benefit to members of staff, using data to explain the case. So going away, finding out how long the waiting times are, what it takes to transition in the countries that you serve, so that you can go to leadership and say, look, these are the challenges that we're facing, and we can make it easier for people by providing that benefit. Is that something that can be a topic of conversation? And it's not an easy conversation to have, especially at the moment where DEI is being challenged, but it's important. It's going to have a benefit for individuals, and it benefits us all in the long run, because you can come out at any stage in life. I think that's hugely important too. I think sometimes people think that topics of this nature don't touch them, but that can sometimes be because they haven't experienced it yet, but it doesn't mean that they won't at some point in life go through a point where they question their identity. So creating those spaces is important. We're coming close to the end now, but I just want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists for taking time today to come and speak to us all. And also thank you to all of you for coming to listening to this conversation. It's hugely important. As you've heard, it is a challenge at the moment to lead with diversity in mind. But having you all join and hear is huge. It's important, and we hope that you've got something that you can go away and take away with you. As I mentioned earlier, there are other events this week. So the PSA have 2 more in support of the Safer to Be Me Summit, one tomorrow on disparities in healthcare, and one on Wednesday on allyship. That proves to be quite a powerful event, both of them. And I'd encourage you to check out the Safer to Be Me Summit as well. That's happening all of this week. There are going to be live events all across Newcastle during the week, and at the end of the week there is also going to be a 2-day conference, so I'd encourage you to check that out as well. Thank you all for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.